everybody had a chance to watch the documentary. If you didn't, we're dropping it at midnight tonight on YouTube.
I will say while we settle in that just thank you to everybody who's here. I don't know everyone who's involved, but the documentary was like a gift from the gods. So thank you so much, everybody. I was blown away.
Bill Wallace, look.
Oh my
Who's
God.
on the screen?
Oh, Bill Wallace, there he is. There.
Oh my God. Oh.
Wade Delaney of the Pentangle is here.
How are you guys? Nice to see you.
Hi,
You too,
Bill.
my friend. You too.
Thanks for being here, buddy. We appreciate it so much.
What a treat.
That's exciting.
Wow. Can't wait to talk to you about rolling around in the mud and stuff. How you doing? So
We
good.
did some of that.
Hey,
Mr. Wallace.
oh, wow. I can't believe it. How long has it been since you guys have seen each other, Sam and Bill?
We're in connection email, but we haven't seen each other for a long time.
It's been, I guess,
36 years.
30 years and change. It's very hard to believe.
Wow. Amazing. So amazing.
But it has been great being connected with Sam and some of the guys and you guys with this documentary and Christian. It's really been a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's been great talking to you the last few days over email. And your daughter, Emily Wallace, who's a Theo actress, a voiceover actress, she's great. She's going to be here today. I don't know if she's here yet. I can only see a few people. She just arrived, I guess. She, in the emails, she referred to herself as Emily Wallace, daughter of honorary member Wade Delaney of the Pentangle. She put that in her email, which I thought was hilarious. I was just cracking.
And in memoriam of Wade Delaney, he
That's true.
Michael's character.
Yeah. Wow. Justin Hillard's here. Hi, Justin.
Justin Hillard.
Austin Trunick, the author of the Canon Guide. Where is it? I got it right here.
The most devoted guy.
Great book. Sam does the foreword to the book as well. So you guys should check it out.
Justin Hillard, the most devoted guy to the cause of preserving Canon films.
Yeah, that's true.
Avenging Force, American Ninja, etc. He puts a lot of work. Excellent. Everybody should read his book. It's an excellent book and very funny. Let me tell you, I was reading the book and laughing out loud. It's a really, in a sarcastic way, but very, very funny. Hey, Emily. We have a nice picture. I got your picture.
Oh, it's a great picture, yeah.
We have a picture together.
Yeah.
Emily.
Awesome. Thanks for being here.
Shelly Ninchuk is coming up. She has a great website, a martial art website. Here she is.
Hi, Shelly. Thanks for joining us on Patreon, too. All of the Patreon people, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
We really appreciate that. I also, let me introduce my co-host and co-producer, Dustin. He's up there with the American Ninja poster and the Avenging Force poster back there.
Hello, everybody. I can't see everybody. I want to see a few of your faces, but thank you all for coming. We appreciate it.
He's a huge help on everything I do. And also my wife, she doesn't have a webcam, unfortunately. She's the still photograph, Mirabai Winsby up there, but she's doing all the back end stuff. There were several patrons that unfortunately had to work today, some that are overseas that weren't confident with their English. I kept telling them, please come and just watch and, type in a question if you have it. We don't care, so I hope they're here, but I'll stop babbling and we'll go to the first question here.
Let me show a picture of of Bill Wallace here.
Oh, yeah.
Let's share a screen with you if it's okay. So you see the screen?
There he is. Yep.
Bill Wallace. Regretfully, two of the people in this picture are not with us anymore. They passed away, but luckily we are still here, and some of us are still here. So
no, I know. It was.
Can you tell us a little bit, Bill? What was your experience? How did you feel about this?
Oh, I mean, I loved it, and I loved being part of the Pentangle. And the other guys pictured there are John P. Ryan, who is, as mentioned in the documentary, is just a wonderful actor with just a huge body of work behind him. And he was such a thoughtful and such a sweet man, as you talk about, Sam, in the documentary. And then we had Carl Johnson, who actually was my neighbor for a number of years in Studio City. Correct. And I would see Carl, and Carl was a very creative guy. He also had invented a and he's the strong guy with a shaved head. And he was very into bodybuilding, and he was a wonderful mosaic artist, and his pieces were all over Southern California. And he had a weightlifting machine company that he created. And then Mark Alaimo was the other visible member of Pentangle, with James Booth being the guy behind the scenes. And Mark is a wonderful guy who played the sort of the ninja character in the swamps and the fighting, and just so much fun working with those guys and being in New Orleans. I must admit, when I came back from New Orleans, my agent called me up and said, "Bill, you've gained a little bit of weight from being down there in New Orleans." We would go out and have meals together and had such a wonderful time. And there's a picture of Michael and I in the fight scene in the swamp, and it was that was a lot of fun. And you speak a lot about that, Sam, during the documentary about what we did and how.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think maybe in that shot, I literally did hit my head on the tree.
Correctly, I remember.
We broke for lunch because they had anchored those plywood platforms into the swamp and the bayou, but they were very slippery. And so one time when Michael was throwing me against the tree, or I was trying to tackle him, I slipped and conked my head on the tree. But that was a lot of fun, and what those stuntmen and fight coordinators and the crew and anchoring that in this swamp, it was just pretty amazing what happened every day.
How long did you?
Shirley wants.
How long did you train and choreograph that fight?
The fight we spent, I believe we were there in the bayous, maybe not in one, because it was in two different locations, but we spent like 2 weeks in the water, in the rain, in the water. Some of the rain was real, it rains every day. And when it stops raining, we had two huge rain machines and huge fans to create the wind, and the wind machine will pour wind, the rain machine will rain on top of us. Every take, the end of the take, stop the machine, stop the rain, reset, and again rain. And water presents so many mechanical and technical problems. One of them, lens. The camera lens is always covered with water. So they came up with they found out a device that deflects the water all the time out of the lens. So you will not see the droplets on the lens. So this whole mechanism was on top of the camera. So the whole camera is very heavy, and most of it is handheld because of the dynamic of the fight. And we spend a lot of time in the bayous inside, and all of this is in the real swamps. We didn't have any pool work or heated, beautiful, clean water, nothing. Everything was done, this whole fight. So I believe it was 2 weeks, grueling work, really, really hard work.
How hard for Bill. It looks like, Bill was down in the mud and the water that whole time. You had leeches on you.
Yeah, the leeches were very real. The first time I got bit by a leech, I saw it on my hand and I ripped it off and threw it away. And we had these Cajun and people who lived there that kind of oversaw some of the security from the critters. And he came up to me and he laughed and he said, "Don't rip it off. Either take a cigarette or some salt and pour it on, and it'll curl up and it won't bite you. It will release its bite from you. Otherwise, if you rip it off, the little head's going to still be there." But it was such an interesting experience. And I guess that fight scene that I was involved in with Michael probably took a day to shoot, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Remember, you especially Michael and you were two young athletic guys, so you did it quicker. Some of the others are more complicated and more stunt work. I kind of remember you two guys did not need stunt doubles because both of you were young and athletic, so you did everything physically. But some others were more complicated, and we need stunt doubling and effects and other stuff. Yeah. Ramp, flying. There is one of them is flying in the air.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So that's done with the air ramps. They're standing on top of an air ramp, and an air ramp catapult them. It's like a catapult, really, and the human being is flying in the air.
Sorry about that, cuz.
Hi, Shelley. Thank you so much for coming to Patreon and being here today.
Hi. I've met Sam before. I've interviewed him. I met Sam at Dragon Fest, and it was like really kind of a combination of a question. One is, it's about a guy we both know, and I really love him. His name is Stephen Lambert. And did he do any of the stunts in Avenging Force? And then the other thing I have is, for a first-time filmmaker for myself, I wanted to know what is a good way for a short to get funding, because I've done like GoFundMe and everything too. For yourself, for your first film, how did you get over that obstacle to get funding for yourself?
I will answer. Many of you know the stunt coordinator, Steve Lambert, which I worked with in many movies, not in this one. With Steve Lambert, I made other ninja movies, Revenge of the Ninja, Ninja 3: The Domination, and American Ninja. And he was a great collaborator with me, and we did some crazy stuff together, really crazy stuff. But once we got into Avenging Force, he was already kind of moved to a major studio movies. He was Raiders of the Lost Ark, suddenly he was into big movies, Remo Williams. And so he did not come and work with us in this movie. And the stunt coordinator in this movie was BJ Davis. BJ was as brave and as imaginative and as collaborative as Steve Lambert. BJ did fantastic stuff in this movie. And of course he had a crew. This was a heavy action movie. So we had I think the stunt crew was like 6 people all the time with us. You know, one of them became very famous. I think he's Jason in the Elm Street movies. Oh.
That was Kane Hodder.
Oh, Kane Hodder. Yeah.
You can see him in the shipyard. You can see Kane Hodder.
Yeah, that's right.
You can actually see him.
I forgot about that.
Let me get to the second question. I was in my career, I was very, very lucky. Let's put it this way. I did direct about 25 movies, and all of those movies, luckily, I was approached to direct. I did not initiate them, except, and it comes back to your question, the first movie, the first feature, full feature I directed. I was already assistant director for 5 years. I was in the business. And at some point when I was in the business, like 5 or 6 years, I was so tired of being assistant director, and it was hard work. And I decided to go back to school for a graduate degree. And when in most film school, it was a film school, Loyola Marymount University here in Los Angeles. And usually the way it works in a graduate degree, there is the final project, which is to make a movie, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever the school requires. And so we did. So did we. We had to make a movie 30 minutes. But I already had so much experience because I was assistant director in big movies. And I decided to use those 3 years or 2.5 years in school to make a feature film instead of making 30 minutes. So the financing, nowadays you're talking about modern ways of financing, GoFundMe, Patreon, whatever, any other way. We didn't have all of this. And we required much more money because we were shooting on a 16mm film. There was no video shooting at the time. So within the school, I had a friend, David Womark, who was the producer and I was the director. I wrote the script, One More Chance, which incidentally, is the first movie that, what's her name? appeared for the first time.
Kirstie Alley.
Kirstie Alley. The actress Kirstie Alley, which later became a star. It was her first movie, was my first movie. And so we financed it through using the school facility, using the students as volunteers of the crew making the movie. And we used all the financial aid that I can get out of the school and my friend David get out of school. And we got all the financial aid to buy the negative, to buy film, to develop the film. And eventually we hooked up with Canon Film because we still didn't have enough money to finish the movie. With all, that's it. One more chance. That's the cassette, one more chance. And so we didn't have enough money, and then at some point we hooked up with Canon Film, which was willing to add a little bit more money and to finish the financing of the movie. So I know what you are talking about. Putting together. Let me put it this way. To me, the way I see it, we are creative people. Making a movie is the easy part. Getting the finances together, to me, in my mind, is the most difficult thing in this business of movie making. But luckily, or I'm not fit to raise money and to be a producer. And luckily, I didn't have to deal with it. This is I guess it's a matter of life, because many young filmmakers, they have to somehow raise the financing. So that's the best I can answer, the best answer I can give you. But many young movie makers, you guys on the internet, and you can talk among yourself and see what other people are doing. When I go to festivals and I meet young people and I meet young movie makers, I hear from them the troubles, the problem of raising financing to make movies. And I know it's not easy.
For Sam, if you could expand a little bit on when you first met Canon and Golan and Globus, what your first impressions or first contacts were like?
First of all, Canon became, there is a lot of interest, let's put it this way. Lately, in the last 10 years, or even in the last 6-7 years, there was so much interest suddenly in Canon, in the company Canon Film and the project they did. There is like 2 or 3 documentaries. The biggest one is the Electric Boogaloo, The Secrets of Canon, whatever it's called. And Austin is writing a book, 3-part book. He wanted to write one book, and he found out that the material is so large that he had to divide it into 3 books to tell the story of Canon. It's amazing, and there are many more. I have here two books in Spanish about Canon. There is so much interest. There is a Canon appreciation society on the internet. So every place I go, lately I'm being invited to festivals and in the nostalgia corner. Every festival has a nostalgic corner. So they show old movies. So if there are festivals who are interested. And what happened lately, kind of many of the people who were involved in Canon, sadly enough, passed away. They were all old enough and disappeared. And I'm became kind of authority on Canon because I'm still around. And I was with Canon many years, and I can tell, and there is a lot of interest. So let me tell you in few words, because it's a long story. Canon was run by 2 Israelis that has a lot, they had a vision, unbelievable vision. It's Menachem Golan and Yoram Globus. They were even cousins, not only partners. And Menachem Golan was the visionary, was the creative part of it. Yoram Globus was the financial part of the company. And I met them and I worked with them prior to Canon. Canon was a company, a New York-based distribution company, and they purchased the company and moved it to Los Angeles. So it was an existing company, but they have a long history before Canon. And I started to work with them much earlier. They had another company that was called Ameri-Euro Picture here in Hollywood. And the first movie they produced was the movie Lepke with Tony Curtis, a gangster movie. It was during the time of The Godfather. So that's where I met them, and I started to work with the 2 of them in all kind of capacity. My first job was like general assistant, go for this, go for that. And then I grew up with them, with the other company which disappeared, and I became assistant director. So I worked with them for a while, and so this was the relationship between us. I met them, I worked with them, they relied on me, they trusted me. I was assistant director in many of the movies they produced. One of the biggest one that they produced was Operation Thunderbolt. It was a big movie. Menachem Golan directed. Another. When I decided to direct my own movie, as I told you, in the school when I went to Loyola Marymount, I went to school for 2 years. I was not in contact with them for this period of 2 years anymore. And then I heard that they bought a company. The name of the company is Canon, and they moved it from New York to Los Angeles. When we were strapped for money, when we didn't have any more money, I said, okay, let's go back to my connection. Who is my connection? Menachem Golan. I worked with him. I was his assistant director. He has now a company. And I went and, I took my partner, David Womark. We went to meet with them. We showed them the material. They liked it. They decided to finance the ending of the movie, the end of the movie. So this was the beginning of Canon Film. It was really in the beginning. There were small offices, like 6 or 8 people were working there in the company. But the company through the year, and this was the year 1980, 88, I think 80 or 81, 1981. And the company exploded. The company became, it was an independent movie maker in Hollywood, but they had an ambition to become a studio. They really wanted to become a studio. It was not the only one. Coppola wanted to create a Zoetrope. Everybody wanted, Corelco wanted to be a studio. Everybody wanted to be a studio. But they had the vision and the energy and the power. And at some point, at the end, this company produced more than 400 movies. There were years, and Austin is better. I was inside, but he researched it. There were years that they produced like 40, 50 movies in 1 year. So the company became crazy. Luckily for me, they were so busy that they really, and even in the beginning, listen, eventually they trusted me to direct a movie. After this movie, there was a story, they made the movie Enter the Ninja, and they wanted to make a sequel of Revenge of the Ninja, and they turned to me and they trusted me to direct a movie for them, which was called Revenge of the Ninja. And the movie did well, more or less well in box office. So from that point on, they just gave me projects, one after the other, to direct. And this was not my project, not my initiative, not my script. I just did the directorial work. I was working for them, and there are a lot of stories about the amount of control that those two guys were exerting over the project that they did. But luckily for me, either they trusted me, or at some point they became so busy that they let me alone. They did not bother me in any of the movie I directed for them. Not Revenge of the Ninja, not American Ninja. Really, I was, from the moment they gave me a project, I went on and with a crew, not by myself. There were always assigned producers, production manager, producers, assistant director, a whole crew, but they did not bother me in the creative process at all. Sometimes there were, we had clashes over budget, because I love to go over budget. I feel that it's my duty to get out of the producers more money than they give me to make the movie. But other than that, so this was Canon. Canon was a crazy place. At some point, it was crazy place, and later on they signed Chuck Norris as an in-house star, and Charles Bronson, in-house star, and it became a crazy place. Mainly action movies, but here and there they did some also John Cassavetes movie, strange artistic movies. So this was Canon, and I really urge you to read the book, the catalog, the Canon catalog that Austin wrote, and it's only the beginning. He's going to write 2 more books.
Wow, I just gotta say, I have moderated personally over 50 Q&A panels. That is one of the best answers I've ever heard in my life. That was incredible. My mind is blown.
Listen, this is a short answer. I can talk about Canon easily for 1 hour because the complexity of Canon was so, at some point it became so complex, and the downfall of Canon was so high, as glorious as the ascending was, so tragic was the descending. The story of the end of Canon with the bankruptcy and court and government and investigations, it was amazing.
A question here from Frank Cossell. He's one of our patrons on Patreon. Super nice guy, great guy, huge Sam fan, huge Shokasugi fan. He just wanted to ask about the sequel, Sam. I mean, we talked about that a little bit in the documentary, but did you guys have plans for the sequel? You know, it's open-ended, so I know there were plans for part 2. At least James Booth had plans for part 2. I don't know if Canon did.
So you see him here on the screen, and Jim wrote the script. Jim was an actor, passed away already a few years ago. He was a British actor, famous from the movie Zulu, but many work. And he hooked up with Canon, I don't know how. I didn't know, and he started to write. He was a writer, he was writing for Canon. And he wrote, and they commissioned him, I guess, I was not involved, to write this script. It was called Night Hunter, before it was Avenging Force. And he wrote it as a sequel to Invasion USA for Chuck Norris. So it's not a direct sequel, it doesn't tell the same story of Invasion USA, but he was commissioned, or he volunteered to write a script for Chuck Norris, which is called Night Hunter. I guess they presented it to Chuck Norris, and Chuck Norris didn't want to do the movie, so that's how it became Michael Dudikoff and Steve James project. But he wrote a part for himself, Jim Booth, and he was the head of the CIA, or the agency, so-called in the movie, the agency. So he wrote part for himself, and the movie is written in a very clever way that at the end of the movie, you don't know who is the missing member of the Pentangle. You don't, as an audience, it doesn't tell you, but there is, at the end, in the last second, the last few seconds of the movie, there is insinuation that he is the character of James Booth. He is the one who will keep the group alive after Michael Dudikoff took care of all of them, or Matt Hunter took care of all of them. So I guess, I never spoke with him about it, so I guess he wrote it in a way that there will be a sequel. But here's what happened. And I'm speculating a little bit here, because I'm not sure that I'm right. We made the movie, prior to this, we made a movie called American Ninja. The movie was done in the Philippines, and we started pre-production of Avenging Force or Night Hunter right after we finished the editing of American Ninja. American Ninja was not out in the theaters. So we started pre-production, and we started production, and the company Canon gave American Ninja to MGM for distribution, or MGM picked it up, which is a big company, excellent company. Now we are shooting in the film in New Orleans this, and then we start to hear what is happening in the theaters with American Ninja. It's going crazy. Theaters, not only America, all over the world, not only North America. In Paris, the movie played for 2 weeks. In France, it was on the top of the box office for 2 weeks. And suddenly we start to hear what is happening with American Ninja, which was very popular, extremely popular. So, of course, I can imagine that Canon Film, the company said, okay, we are having a chicken that lays golden eggs here, the goose with the golden eggs. Let's plan another American Ninja #2. So while we were still in New Orleans, or when I was in the editing room, let's say with Michael Duffy editing the movie, they were already putting everything, the whole mechanism of making another American Ninja, because suddenly they were all the company was now concentrated on making another American Ninja. So the same thing happened. We finished the editing. The day we finished the editing of this Avenging Force, I was already on a plane to South Africa to start to prepare American Ninja, and then concentrated. When Avenging Force, they loved Avenging Force. It was they saw it as a good quality movie. But they had a big fight with MGM, with the company MGM Distribution. And Canon, which was not a major company, it was a sizable independent, but not a major, they decided to go out and distribute Avenging Force by themselves, exhibiting in the theaters. And that's not easy. Exhibiting in the theaters, it's a very complex process, as much as I understand. And the majors, they know how to do it. The big ones, Universal, Paramount, MGM. Canon didn't know how to do it. So the movie did not enjoy success in the theaters because they didn't know how to promote it. They didn't know, and they didn't even have the actor. By then already, Michael Dudikoff and Steve James became a household names because of American Ninja, but they couldn't even use them for promotion because we were already in South Africa making this movie, American Ninja #2. And American Ninja 2 came out, it was successful, so immediately they want #4, #5, it went all the way to 5, without me, but with Michael Dudikoff. So they kind of neglected Avenging Force because they were concentrated on let's make money with American Ninja. So I think that's what happened. That's why we never did a sequel, because it did not, the movie was not very popular, not as an American Ninja, did not make as much money, so it didn't call for a sequel from a financial point of view. Of course, from a story point of view, it really, and I had this question came up so many times, why there is no sequel to Avenging Force. This is my best answer that I can imagine. The company was very concentrated in making more and more American Ninjas, and they neglected the Avenging Force.
They should do a sequel now. 35 years later, it's more relevant. Do it now.
Avenging Force Awakens.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Dudikoff, if you're out there, we need you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It looks like Michelle has another question. Anybody else wants to raise their hand too? I'm sure people have questions, but Michelle, did you want to ask something?
I was wondering if he's going to be joining Stephen Lamb there at Dragon Fest in Burbank.
I'm not very familiar with the world of martial art. People are wondering because I directed few martial art movies, but what really happened to me, I do not come from martial art background. I'm not a martial artist. I never trained. I never studied any of this. And by luck, our two paths, the path of martial art and movie making, me as a movie maker and the martial artist, we interjected. We met each other. It started with Sho Kasugi. I met Sho Kasugi, and we made the movie Revenge of the Ninja. Steve Lambert is a martial artist. He was the stunt coordinator. Later on, I was lucky enough to work with Tadashi Yamashita, with Mike Stone, with Richard Norton. Those are all renowned martial artists, and they had students of them coming to the set and working with us. So it was kind of a meeting between me and martial art. I was lucky because I was introduced to interesting way of thinking, interesting philosophies and disciplines. It didn't get me into martial art, and one way or another, because my main goal and concentration is making telling stories through movies. And for me, it's okay if I work with break dancers or with martial artists, same thing for me. But in Los Angeles, there is a museum, the history of martial art. And and of course, Steve Lambert, which is a martial artist, he's part of this society or whatever they are. And I was invited a few times to the museum, and they presented me with an award for the movies I directed. And they conduct a festival, like martial art event once a year. I think last year or this year, they are not going to do it, obviously because of the pandemic. And I was invited one. I came with Steve Lambert. I might come in the future again. I just came by as a guest. I don't have enough knowledge and interest in martial art or enthusiasm to be there. But you know, I was there with Steve, and maybe I'll come one more time if it will be conducted again after the pandemic is over and everything, and we are back in normal times. So this is my involvement in martial art, my connection to martial art. Not much more than that. But I was lucky enough. I'm happy that it happened in my life, that I met those kind of people that I've mentioned. There's a lot to learn with them, and there is a pleasure of viewing. To me, there was a lot of pleasure of viewing them executing what they do. It's like, you know, masters. Sho Kasugi, when he does a number, it's fantastic. You just to sit on the director chair and to watch him.
I wanted to ask a Wallace question real quick. I've talked to Sam countless times, you know, about directing Cannon films, but Mr. Wallace has, you know, been in what he calls his Cannon trilogy, which, you know, he was fighting for the Delta Force, then fighting against the Avenging Force, and then he was also in America 3000. So, and you've also worked with who I'm a huge fan of. Dustin's a huge fan of Steve James. I know that Chris Stiles is a huge fan of Steve James. You've worked with him on 2 films, Delta Force and Avenging Force. So I was just wondering if you could just tell us anything from an actor perspective, what it was like working for Cannon Films. If you can tell us anything about Steve James, because he was taken from us far too young, and it's hard to find information on him. It's even hard to find pictures. I mean, thank God his daughter, Debbie James, let me use a lot of photos for the documentary. But anything anecdotal, anything you have.
Well, Steve was an incredible guy. And I was thinking when Sam was describing about the martial arts with Cannon. So in the very first film I did for Cannon was America 3000, and a guy named David Engelbach directed that. I was a replacement when apparently the actor that I played a part named Gruss, and it was a post-apocalyptic kind of farce where women ruled the world and men were their slaves. And at a very young age, me and this guy named Corvus escaped from them and formed our own band of men out in the Badlands of the Negev Desert, actually, in Israel, which was this post-apocalyptic place. But we had martial arts instructors and fight coordinators. A guy named Ernie Reyes was kind of coordinating us, and the women were giving us high hook kicks and all that stuff. And then I had the opportunity to come back very quickly and work with Steve James in Delta Force. And we were Chuck Norris and Lee Marvin's platoon sergeants in the Delta Force. Steve was the most gracious, humble, incredible guy. We just howled with laughter all the time. We spent a lot of time with each other in Israel. We were back in Tel Aviv and the Negev and in Haifa making that film. And then when I had the opportunity right away to work with him and Sam in New Orleans, we just, you know, it was so awesome because we were such good friends at that time. And you speak about somebody passing away way too young. I think Steve was probably about 8 years older than me. And the last time I saw him was in Studio City. I'd say it was maybe 1992 or 93, and I ran into him at the post office and we chatted for a bit, and we vowed to get together, but then we missed each other, and I sadly learned that about 6 weeks later he had passed away, and he had cancer, and it apparently got him very, very quickly. But he was a guy that had this great depth of knowledge about cinema and black cinema and knowledge about the martial arts world. I mean, he was a legitimate double or triple black belt himself, I believe, in Taekwondo and some other type of martial arts discipline. And but he was also, you know, moving out of that. He was in a lot of movies. He was in that movie the player. He carries Julia Roberts out of the gas chamber at the very end, and he was making his way into a lot of other films besides the action films. And so, yes, he was an extraordinary actor, extraordinary action actor and physical actor, but he was even more than that, just an extraordinary guy. And we just would howl with laughter. You know, we had these posses in New Orleans with John P. Ryan and Carl Johnson. We would go out and have a lot of fun. And then in Israel, it would be with Robert Forster, another incredible actor and a wonderful friend of ours who recently passed away last year, and Chuck and the stunt people. You mentioned B.J. Davis and the Pike brothers, who were the stunt coordinators of Delta Force. And then hanging out with a guy like in Delta Force, Lee Marvin or Martin Balsam, Shelley Winters, Joey Bishop. It's just an extraordinary thing. But Steve was wonderful. He really was. And yeah, certainly miss him. It's been really fun seeing him on film and seeing the documentary and revisiting this. And I wanted to say hi to my daughter, Emily. Emily and I saw 2 years ago Avenging Force when I was out in California visiting her. And we sat down and watched it, and we said, my God, this is really kind of present day with all that was happening in the country. There was some foresight there that I don't think really would have been imagined our country would be experiencing. But anyway, I do want to say hi to you, Em. She's a wonderful voiceover actress. And
I've been watching these movies since I was way too young to be watching them, 10, 9, 10, and I've seen them all 10 times each. I'm a huge fan. So this is great.
So are we. We're huge fans too. Thank you both for being here today.
It's been so much fun.
Great.
Listen, if we go for a moment back to Steve James, maybe the story is in the documentary, I don't remember. But Steve James, I realized in every movie, here is, every movie that I worked with him, and I worked with him 4 times.
I know where you're going with it.
And every movie, he suddenly takes off, he finds a place to take off his shirt. To kind of rip off his shirt and continue the scene. In the middle of the action scene, he will take off his shirt and continue without the shirt. I said, Steve, crazy. What are you doing? Why every time you take
in
off?
The shipyard, he has his shirt on, and then
he used to
his
tear
shirt's
it off.
off.
And you repeat it in American Ninja. I said, Steve, what are you doing? Why are you taking off the shirt? He said, are you crazy? He tells me, you think I'm working so hard to maintain such a body and I'm not going to show it?
Well, he had a different story from me, Sam. He said that you and the crew were insistent that he take his shirt off.
No, this was his. He told me in every movie I have to take off my shirt.
That's so great.
Lucky for us, quite frankly.
Yeah. I mean, totally lucky for us. That's amazing.
That's the best.
Does anybody else want to jump in here? I mean, I'm always talking too much. Dustin, do you have a question? Beth Accomando is here, my friend from KPPS, NPR Radio. She also has her own show, which is Cinema Junkie, her podcast, which is great. You have to have a question, Beth.
Well, actually, I'd like to just make a comment, and thank you for doing this, because when I got the link for it, I was going like, wow, 2 hours. I think this documentary is longer than the film itself.
It is.
How much can they talk about? And I was a little hesitant. And then before I knew it, it was over. And it was so enjoyable. And I just love your ability to take those deep dives, and your passion for this stuff is just so much fun. And Sam, you are such a great talker and storyteller. It was just, I mean, I'm so looking forward to the other parts now. So I just want to thank you for doing these and for doing those deep dives, because I think that, we're at a time where everybody wants things really fast and, quick bites, and the ability to kind of look at something like that is really fun. And I loved your connection to the present day with it. That was unexpected, and I thought that was great. What did you think of that, Sam? What did you think of
regarding the documentary? I'm not a documentarian making documentary movie, but I love to watch documentaries. And you see a lot. There are a lot of documentaries around. Some of them are excellent, some of them good, some of them are bad, boring. What I consider when I see a documentary, and for me, what's important in a documentary, that it's not only a chain, endless chain of facts, but what is the relevance? What are you leading us? Is there anything, any substance in the documentary that goes beyond what you are telling us? So when I first saw the movie, you know, Christian let me see the movie, the documentary, and then when I realized that he connected between the past and the present, the social implications. Of course, this is not a movie with a social message or anything like this, but still he found in the movie what was relevant and how does it work as a commentary of the present situation and what's happening with the extremist right wings. So I said, wow, this is the type of documentaries that I consider worth watching, because they have meaning beyond just describing events. There is an implication, there is a conclusion, there is like a pinnacle point in the documentary that brings you emotionally. I was very excited when it brings you and shows you that there is more to a movie, because it is talking about a movie which was done 34 years ago, and there is more to a movie. Even though it's just an entertainment, people just come for escapism, but there is more to it, and there is relevant, and that's what impressed me so much in your documentary, guys. I really think it's a top-notch documentary, really.
Americans, we're living in dangerous times.
Just to show you how we were there, days after day, just working like this inside the swamps with the alligator, with the moccasins, with the snakes. Of course, we had guards, and but this was tough work. You go in the morning, you come out only for lunch, back and go out at the end of the day. So, and then this was one such a sequence, and another sequence that took a lot of us was this sequence, which was also complicated. Took few days to shoot. Was very complicated from a special effect and safety point of view, to make sure that nothing will happen. Many actors and stunt people were involved in this sequence of the fire in the building. So this was another sequence. We had also a lot of fun. There was a Cajun village was built. This was actually a set, and it was built for us by Marsha Hens. She was and all of those characters, they were hired right there. They were the real guys, the real stuff. So we hired them right there in the Cajun land, and they gave so many advices and so many. You do it this way. You should do it this way. That's not the way it's done. I remember here we have a nice photo that explains how we set up a shot. You know, BJ Davis is here. I'm showing him, and Sharon Mann was the assistant director. She was very good. It was a tough movie, and to coordinate all the different special effect and safety and stunt, and she was fantastic. And you can see how we are blending, how we are working, preparing a shot. Every shot was so sophisticated, so complicated, and it was really an interesting. And I might say that there was a camaraderie. Because we all stayed in hotel. Bill mentioned it. We all stayed in one hotel. It was a huge crew. It was a big crew. We were a big crew, and except the local people, which didn't stay with us in the hotel, but all the rest of us, we stayed in the hotel, and there was such a camaraderie and enthusiasm. People every day in harsh condition, and all in location, and we worked 6 days, not 5 days. You know what I remember? At the same time when we were shooting there was another studio movie shooting there, big movie.
Yeah, it was Angel Heart.
Angel Heart.
I remember.
Big budget.
Yeah.
And you know, on those big budget studio movies, they shoot only 5 days, not 6 days like us. But every Saturday night, I think they have a big party. That's part of the budget in a big. So they used to invite us. They say, "You guys come, Angel Heart. You guys come to our party." And every Saturday night, I believe it was, we used to go to their parties because they had a big budget. You know, fantastic.
That was so awesome. Emily knows this story. I tell it all the time. One day, I'm walking with John P. Ryan through the French Quarter, and we see their trucks and their vans and honey wagons, the whole deal. And he says, "What's that over there?" I said, "Oh, they're making this movie called Angel Heart with Mickey Rourke and Bob De Niro." Right. And he goes, "Bobby, Mickey." And he marched right onto the set, and he started acting a production assistant if Robert De Niro was there and Mickey Rourke was there. Well, Robert De Niro was not there, but Mickey Rourke was. And next thing you know, we're spending the entire afternoon with Mickey Rourke in his trailer, watching the Indianapolis 500, and those two guys knew each other from forever. And it was such a fun afternoon for me being this young guy with these guys. And I've always said that, you know, Mickey Rourke treated me like a king, and it was just so much fun. And John P. Ryan worked with everybody. He knew everyone.
I remember what impressed me the most was that they also they were filming in location, and they had these huge air-conditioned trucks. And wherever they went, they connected. We didn't have any. We were sweating like pigs, you know. And every place they went, they connected those huge air-conditioned machines, and they worked under wonderful air-conditioned situation, which we didn't have.
You ever watched the Mickey Mouse Club? Because you know what today is? Today is Wednesday. So anything can happen today.
Sam, Frank wanted to know if you knew Isaac Florentine and if you've seen any of his ninja films and what you think of them. Isaac
Florentine, not only that he's a lensman, I'm an Israeli. Isaac is an Israeli. And and Isaac Florentine is a martial artist. Good martial artist. I've seen him performing and doing his stuff. And years ago, when we just did the Revenge of the Ninja, maybe, I got a telephone call or request, some young guy from Israel. He said, "I'm coming to visit, can I come and visit you?" He came to my house. This was Isaac Florentine. He was still a film student, maybe. And that's how I got to meet him and to know him. And this was right after Revenge of the Ninja. He was so impressed. He saw this movie, Revenge of the Ninja. It was something. It was the first ninja movie that really was successful and big. And that's how I met Isaac. And since then, we kept in contact. So we are in contact more than 30, at least 35 years. And then he came back here, he started to direct, he did a lot of the mutant, not the mutant ninja, what do you call them, the television show that was so popular with the children.
Oh, the Power Rangers?
Power Rangers.
Yes.
Isaac was the main director of most of the episodes in Power Rangers. He was not the producer, but he was from a directing point of view, he was the man behind Power Rangers. And then he moved on to start to make his movies. I didn't see all of Isaac, so there is a lot of admiration. He knows my movies, I know his movies. I haven't seen all his martial art movies, but I've seen some. Because he is a martial artist and he's a great fan and admirer of the classic martial art Hong Kong movies, what we call the Kung Fu movies. So he concentrates, when he makes his movies, martial art, he spends much more energy and time on the martial art part of the movies, which I do less, but he's a great action director. And I think he's the last of the low-budget genre action movie directors, because this section of movies are disappearing, totally disappearing. the low budget genre movies. Maybe some horrors, but that's it. It's kind of, they are disappearing. Definitely the action, low budget action is disappearing. And
yeah, him and Scott Adkins do a lot of great work together. They've made a lot of great movies together.
Yeah, and Isaac is probably the last one. Isaac Florentin is the last director who was still involved in this field.
Frank has a follow-up question to that a little bit too. Why don't you see more of that, those types of films anymore? More of the mid-budget movie. You know, there's the low-budget movie, there's the big-budget movie. Why don't we see more canon type of movies anymore?
From the beginning of the 80s, 1980s, there was suddenly a new media, a new business. This was the home rental, the home video business. The business of renting cassettes, going home. And it started small, but at some point there was in every corner of every neighborhood, in every 2 streets, you have a rental shop of video making. Now, prior to the 80s, if you go back to the 50s, to the golden era of Hollywood, there were always the B movie. The studios used to make the A movies, big budget, B movies, very small budget, tiny movies, because they played it in the double bill theaters. They played the A movie first, or the B movie, so that's how they put together a double bill. So that was a way for the studio to utilize their system. Television came, B movies disappeared, more or less. But still, independent people, independent movie makers would make mainly horror pictures, because it's pretty cheap to make a horror picture. It's much cheaper. And then the video business came. It was the beginning of the 80s. And there was money in there. The studios did not pay attention to this field, to this financial resource. Exactly the same way they didn't understand in the beginning. The major networks did not understand what the cable meant in the beginning. They did not see the money in the cable. So was the studios in the cassettes. They did not see the money in the cassettes. They didn't. And those independent companies came into this niche, into this void, and started to exploit the money out of this cassette. It was Canon, it was Corelco, it was Crown Entertainment, P&M, Shapiro Glickenhaus. There are at least 20 companies like this who made low budget, Roger Corman. They started to make movies aimed directly to renting it out and or putting it on cassette without theatrical distribution. They don't put it in theater directly. And this market grew bigger and bigger, so our budgets, and I, Canon was part of them, and I was one of the directors who made those kind of movies. And this field generated more and more money, and so we got more money to make the movies. And suddenly we were not making low budget, tiny movies. We were making what is today known as a medium budget movies. So, Breaking 2 Electric Boogaloo is $5-6 million at the time. It was huge budget for an independent company in the 80s. Avenging Force was more than 6 million. I guess more than 7 million. It was not a low budget movie. So we were thriving. This field was thriving, and some directors, and stars came out of it. Schwarzenegger, Stallone. They all grew up in this field. Michael Dudikoff, Van Damme, and directors, Joe Zito, myself, Steve Carver, who just passed away a few weeks ago, and other directors were expert in this field. And so it went until the middle of the 90s, 1995. And at some point, the studios, they realized it's a good source of income. Why are we letting them, those little companies, make the money rather than us? And then they started to make exactly the same movies, the studio, with a much bigger action. I will just bring a sample, True Lies, for instance, or Predator, which was studio movies, the same type of movies, the same kind of structure, the same more or less, but those were much bigger. Those were 20 million, 30 million budget. And now the audience were presented with the same audience the same fans, the same audience who loved this type of movies. Suddenly they were presented with a much better movies, higher quality, and basically what happened financially, that the studio pushed the independent out of this field which was called the medium budget movies. They made the same movies with bigger budget, and they took Stallone into they moved Stallone into the studios. They took Van Damme into the studios. They took those stars who were the stars of the medium budget into the big budget, and basically it killed the what we call the low budget, the medium budget action movie. At the same time, parallel, we were introduced to filming with video instead of film, and that made the production, making a movie, much cheaper. We had to spend a lot of money on buying film, developing film. There was a lot of. Suddenly, there was a video which didn't use film, need much less lighting and lights and to create an image on the screen. And many young filmmakers started to make, and they didn't need Hollywood, they didn't need the laboratories, they didn't need Los Angeles anymore, they didn't need New York, they can make a movie wherever they want. So if you have good camera and a editing computer, you can make a movie, that's it. And they made much cheaper movies. They sold it to the televisions, to whoever the buyers of movies are, at a much cheaper price. And then suddenly all those buyers, television, they say, we can buy either the big movies with the big stars or the very cheap movies. Why would we spend money on the medium budget movies that we have to pay much more to buy them? And the producers did not see financial sense. It didn't make any more financial sense to make those movies. And that's why they disappeared, kind of tapered off at the end of the 90s. So a studio either make a huge movie, The Fast and the Furious, superheroes, Avengers, or they were very, very, very small budget that today poor young filmmakers have to make under $1 million movies in today money, not in the 80s money. And that's why it disappeared. This is the answer, the practical answer.
I got a quick question for Mr. Bill Wallace. You touched upon the Delta Force real quick. I'm just wondering what you could tell us a little bit. That movie has quite the ensemble cast, and just like Avenging Force does, but it boasts 4 Oscar winners. It's got Lee Marvin, Martin Wolfson, Shelley Winters, George Kennedy, 2 Oscar nominees, Robert Forster and Robert Vaughn. What can you tell us about that experience a little bit? It must have just been amazing.
It was incredible. I mean, and it was right after America 3000. So really for that year of 1985, yes, I spent, pretty much the entire year in Israel. So that unto itself, to be in Israel and experience it then, and to be able to see so much of the country and return to work with friends that were all the filmmakers and the production crew and everything in Israel was spectacular. But then to get to meet those people, I mean, you've got 6 Oscar nominated or Oscar winners, and to have friendships, to get advice from them, spending time with somebody like Robert Forster, and I spent a lot of time with him, and we became such close friends and saw each other for years to come. I really, until I moved back to the Midwest, would see Bob as often as I could, usually once a month. We spent a couple of years there where we would go to our breakfast joint in West Hollywood, and there would be an ensemble of his friends and peers from the film industry that would join us for breakfast or lunch. It was just really an incredible thing. And being a young guy in my 20s and being with Emily's mom, she was in that film as well. It just was really I mean, who could ask for more? It was just such a fun time and great experience, and to get to work with these legends. And Menachem Golan was the director of that film. To work with him and make these friendships, it was just fantastic.
That's great.
That's great. I'd like to point out your tragic death scene. Spoiler alert for anybody who hasn't seen that movie. But your tragic death scene, man, I was watching it, just the recap the other night, and Steve James starts crying. I mean, and then George Kennedy comes in and gives you the anointing. And it's just like, what? You're like, wait a minute, I wasn't expecting to feel the feels with this action movie. This is what's going on here. It just really all came together, and I think that just shows with all those powerhouse actors. So it's just great. Thank you for the story, and thank you again for coming.
Oh, sure. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for being here. So awesome. I want to make one comment about Delta Force 2. Not Delta Force 2, Delta Force 1. Yeah, Delta Force, I mean, for anyone that's on here that doesn't know it, is basically a remake of Operation Thunderbolt, which Sam worked on with Macham Golan, which is a super famous Israeli film. Sam, you were also you were working as the AD on that, right?
It was a huge production. There were so many ADs, assistant directors.
Yeah.
It was a huge movie, and they rushed. They wanted to finish it very quickly. There were like 3 or 4 Entebbe operation movies being shot at the same time, filmed at it. And Menachem Golan, Yoram Globus, notoriously, they always wanted to be the first. So this movie, which was big with a lot of military hardware, and we were shooting 24 hours a day, non-stop.
Wow.
Oh,
so assistant directors will change, some shift. The assistant directors will work in shifts. So Menachem Golan would go from one shift to another, and there was another director, Boaz Davidson, which was like his secondary director. So sometimes he was so tired that he would leave Boaz Davidson to keep directing. And in one of those events, it became so chaotic, and Boaz Davidson was not around, and Menachem Golan was directing a scene, and it was my shift to be his assistant. And it was a scene with Klaus Kinski. With Klaus Kinski, the actor.
That must have been fun.
And suddenly he was busy. I don't know, he left the set. He was either busy or tired because he was producing also, and the guy was directing non-stop. So he just left me with the script and said, Sam, you know what to do, keep going. Suddenly, young assistant director, suddenly I'm with the Klaus Kinski, huge star, international star, Civil Denning. Suddenly I had to direct like for 2 or 3 hours. They didn't want to stop until he came back to the set.
What was Klaus Kinski like? Was he difficult? Was he fun to work with? What was he like?
He was, in general, it's not my encounter with him. In general, he was a difficult person, difficult actor. Actor who gets into the part, and this is famous. This is famous not only from this movie. In general, there are a lot of stories about him. Sure. So I saw crazy moment, but nothing to do with me directly. The 2 or 3 hours that I worked with him, there was nothing significant. He just followed the direction, and we did what we did. But I understand that he was sometimes he had bursts of craziness, and he was into the part, and he's playing the villain in the movie, so sure. He was a villain. Sure. John P. Ryan Bill mentioned him. He such a villain character in the movie. He was the gentlest person you ever met in your life. And the minute you say cut, he's John P. Ryan. That's it. He's not more the villain. Action, he's Glastonbury. So we didn't have this kind of thing in Avenging Force at all. But that's what Klaus Kinski was. When he was the villain, he was a villain on set, off set, while shooting, while not shooting. He kept the character. That's what he was.
Just wondering, you were talking a little bit just a moment ago about your pre-canon years before film school working for Golden Globus. And I've spoken to so many filmmakers, heard so many stories either directly, indirectly, about clashing with canon over so many things, budget, timing. I'm wondering if those years working under, particularly Menachem, how much do you attribute that to your being able to thrive within the canon system and make movies on budget and on time and really squeeze the extra value out of them?
I'll tell you, Austin, I had advantage, it's the language. Mm-hmm. I did not have to communicate with him in English, which was our native language, Hebrew. So I can switch to Hebrew whenever I wanted. So that's already an advantage. I was his assistant director, so it's a little bit of an adventure. He didn't give me a lot of credit. I didn't have a lot of credit because I was his assistant director. Let me tell you. But there was an element of we can talk in language, and the other thing that I kind of, with the years, I told you I was for 5 years pre-Canon. I was working for them, so I kind of understood the psychic, you know, how he works, what ticks him, what it works, and he was a person of financial, you know, he was about money. He was talking a lot about money, but what will ignite him immediately was storytelling. He was a real storyteller, and you can get him enthusiastic very quickly if you talked with him, or you know, most of you know that he passed away. About story. When you started to talk with him about the story, he forgot about the money. So one way is, so because I knew them, like I understood the psychic, so one of the ways to get away from budgetary or over budget problem, I told you I always went over budget. So it started to talk with him about the story, and the story got him, always got him. He was a real storyteller. Bill, you worked with him, you know, he was all about the story, the situation. And this was, so, and the other thing that I knew, you know, a director has to work with a producer. A responsible director cannot work for one company that produces certain type of movies and make a different type of movie. I was assigned to do a certain type of movies. That's why they paid me money. For a certain type of audience. So I kept myself within this frame, with this responsibility to make a Canon type movie, not to try to be wise and to make a different type of movie. And I knew that what always got Canon was action. So in every movie that I directed for them, the first week was devoted to shoot an action scene. I never started with dramatic. This was part of my tricks. I always told the crew, whoever did the schedule, assistant director, production manager, we're starting with a big action sequence. I don't care what. We do this, we send it to Canon. I was lucky enough to most of the time to work away from the office, except Electric Boogaloo that he little bit drove me crazy, you know, breaking too. But I always started with a big action sequence, send it to the office. When they saw a big action sequence, they did not bother me anymore. They never called me again. You know, they said, okay, we have the action. We have a helicopter exploding in the sky or whatever they liked. But so I did not, I had clashes with him. He was a person he was looking for confrontation. This was within his character. Not only with people who worked with him, he will start a fight with a policeman who will bother him on shooting on the set. You know, I tell the story about the policeman that arrested him in Bethlehem. There was a famous story in Germany on the Autobahn. He decided to stop the traffic to shoot a scene. And when German police arrived to stop him, he started to scream at the police, and eventually they were working for him. They were stopping the traffic for him. So he was a confrontational person, and he liked it. He thrived on it. But, you know, he was bigger than life. Menachem Golan was a person that you don't meet every day, a person like this. You know, bigger than life. You know, his dreams were so big, and his life was in an imaginary life. He didn't live with us in this life. He was in the world of storytelling. He was in another world of making movies. He also directed a lot of stage plays, not only movies. And that's how he was. And you know, so some people could not work with him. They clashed. You tell the great story about Bo Derek. It was just oil and water. They could not work together. There was no way. But I adapted myself to what I saw around me. So I had some fight with him. I had some clashes with him. Sometimes over budget, sometimes over deleting a scene, not deleting a scene, keeping a scene in the movie. I disagreed with him in many points on Electric Boogaloo. Many points. I had a disagreement with him breaking to Electric Boogaloo. So give a little be stubborn a little bit. He liked it. He liked that people confronted him were stubborn and standing for their points, especially when it came to storytelling. Not money. Was not tolerant about money.
Well,
thank you.
Bill, please tell us about your foundation for the veterans, homeless veterans.
Thanks for mentioning that. When I was in Hollywood, when I was 31, I joined the United States Army Reserves. And I thought that would kind of separate me a little bit from just waiting tables in between acting jobs and whatnot. And I was in special operations for 8 years, and I was activated a couple of times, spent time in Panama, Germany, Fort Bragg, and spent almost a year in Bosnia as a NATO peacekeeper at the very end of that civil war. And that experience really kind of changed my life, and I moved out of the film industry into clinical psychology, and had been working really since 2000 with veterans. I worked at the VA in Los Angeles for a few years, and then with a nonprofit called US Vets, the largest provider of housing and programs for homeless veterans in the country, and moved back to Missouri 8 years ago to open up US Vets St. Louis. And we are a nonprofit that has housing and programs for homeless veterans and their families here in St. Louis. We're now called Missouri Veterans Endeavor. We became independent from them, but that's the work I do now, and I just love doing it. And I was thinking about Menachem. Menachem was not only a passionate filmmaker, but he was also a pilot in the War of Independence for Israel, and flew Mustangs, and had a very rich history and a rich life, independent of his filmmaking. And so yeah, thanks for mentioning that. Unfortunately, there's a lot of homeless veterans, not only in the United States, but in England and around the world, because unfortunately we've been at war or acting as peacekeepers and trying to contain war for the past 20 years plus. So anyway, that's thanks for mentioning that, Christian. I appreciate it.
Well, absolutely. Thank you for your service, and that's such a noble work you're doing.
You.
Our the guy that does our music, who's not here, Chris Saunders, he works with homeless youth in the UK, and that's great work that you're doing. I'm really fortunate to have a great job. I do pay for everything out of my pocket for Retrofiend Radio, and I've invested a lot into it, and I don't care about investing into it because I love it. We're going to take what we made on Patreon, and we're going to match that, and we're going to donate it to your cause.
Oh gosh, I mean, that's wonderful. That's so gracious and generous, and thank you. That's terrific. Well, we'll be in touch. That's wonderful. Thank you so much.
Sure, absolutely. The least we could do. And Emily, thanks for being here. Emily Wallace. And if you have little ones at home, do you do voiceover work for cartoons? Zach,
yes, I do. Yeah. I do a lot of voiceover cartoons.
Is it Zach in Time? Zach in Time, right?
Yep, that's a new project coming out. God's School, a lot of fun animation in the works. Yeah.
Yeah. So you may have heard her and didn't even know it.
Yeah. Nice. I do pay my SAG and AFTRA dues like clockwork. So I'm always available, Sam.
Or
don't Shelby, get us available for your film.
Oh man,
Christian, everybody. I devote most of my time now to preserve the legacy. I'm in the business of nostalgia, and if you will see in this book, whoever will get this book, it's about the movies that I directed, but not only. It's about this era and about other directors and other craftspeople who worked in this business. And I want to thank you, Christian and Dustin.
There's my wife.
I'm here because in the last few years, you guys know, for some strange mystical reason that are beyond our control, movies that I directed, some of the movies, not all of them, some of the movies that I directed 35 years ago, suddenly there is a lot of interest in them and they're coming back. Of course, American Ninja is a big movie. You see the poster behind Dustin over there. And suddenly a strange movie, Ninja 3, The Domination. There's so much interest lately. It's unbelievable. And Avenging Force that I like the most, as a maker, the movie that I like the most did not have this, But lately, in the last 3 years, in the last 2-3 years, I see suddenly resurrection. I see suddenly interest in discovering this movie, Avenging Force, which I consider, and so do other people, as the best movie, at least the best action movie I directed. And it's dear to me. I think it's a good, I really think it's a good movie. So thank you for contributing and helping to elevate and bring this, bring it out of the dust.
Yeah, I'd just like to say that just as a fan, before all this started, just your contact with just people in general is just something that a lot of people don't do, and it's really great for anybody who's just a fan of the stuff, and they can get in contact with you and feel a little bit of piece of the magic too. So that's just great too. You're just so generous with all that. So thank you for that too, Sam.
Actually, I'd just like to say one thing really quick to wrap up. Sam believed in this project so much that he wanted to help me to try to make money. So he thought I should do a GoFundMe or a Patreon or something. I was just going to put this on YouTube. Sam was so into it. He was like, you deserve some money for your work and blah, blah, blah. He doesn't want a penny of it, by the way, any of the money I make. And he did the same thing with Marco Seidelman for that huge phone book that he spent 3 years with Marco writing. He didn't take a penny from Marco. He just promotes it. He loves it. I mean, so that's just the kind of guy he is. He spent all this time with us, signed the releases, did everything. We love Sam. I mean, he's just so amazing. And Bill seems very amazing. So does Emily. Everyone, we're just so glad that you're all here. Thank you so much.
Thank you everyone for showing up.
Yeah, thank you so much for hooking us in, and it's so great to be connected with all of you, and Sam in particular. It's wonderful seeing you and being part of this.
Thanks, guys. Thanks so much.
Thank you, guys.
There's a lot more in the future, so we'll be in touch, and please keep your eye on Retrofiend Radio. We miss you, Beth. We miss San Diego. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Austin. Thank you, Connor. Desmond, Frank out in Germany. I don't know what happened to Michelle. I don't know if she's still here, but. And I'll see you soon, Beth, at your Q&A. Yeah. Thanks, Justin.
Thank you, everyone.
Well, everyone.
All right, bye. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend.
See you guys.
Bye. Oh.
See you, Sam.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye.
It's always good seeing you, Sam.
The thing happened right here at this table. Over there walks in Quentin Tarantino. Now, I had read for him about 5 years prior for Reservoir Dogs, and I thought I killed that audition. I didn't get the part. 5 or so years later, maybe 6, whatever it is, he walks in here, he's walking into the restaurant, I yell at him. He comes over, he sits down, he starts BSing with me and Frank. Along the way, I said to him, what are you doing? He said, I'm adapting an Elmore Leonard screenplay called Rum Punch. He said, why don't you read it? I did read it. Six months or so later, I walk in, as every morning I do. I came out that door, Quentin Tarantino. He's sitting in my seat, and before I can even get to the table, he lifts up a script, he hands it to me, and he says, read this, see if you like it. No chasing, no nothing. This guy gave me a gift, the size of which cannot be exaggerated, and that put the career back into motion. Had that not happened, I was ready to jump at a moment's notice. You got to be ready, and you got to have a good attitude. And at that point, I had well understood and internalized that 3-step program. Accept all things, that gives you a good attitude. Deliver excellence right now, that gives you the best shot at the best future you've got coming. And the reward of self-respect and satisfaction, and never quit. You can win it in the late innings if you don't quit. And by then, I was ready.
habe nur endlich, Gott sei Dank, man kann sagen, es ist Zeit geworden, endlich kapiert, dass ich also das machen muss und nicht was anderes. Das heißt, die Idee ist gar nicht so neu.
Was wollen Sie denn damit erreichen? Tun Sie es für sich?
Was heißt für mich? Ich tue es für mich, für Sie, für alle.
Was glauben Sie, habe ich persönlich...
Was machen Leute, die von zu Hause weglaufen und in Parks leben und Hippies sind, wie man sagt, die wirklichen? Was machen die? Für wen tun die das? Für sich, nicht? Für sich, für die anderen, mit denen sie zusammen sind. Für das, was sie erkannt haben, tun sie es nicht.
Was haben Sie konkret erkannt?
Dass man so nicht weiterleben kann. Was andere auch erkannt haben, schon seit langer Zeit, seit Jahrhunderten ziemlich sinnlos sind. Nicht meine Antworten, verstehen Sie? Sie können das auch genauso senden, wie ich es jetzt im Augenblick sage.
Damit bin ich einverstanden. Ich meine...
Also dann lassen Sie mich ausreden, sonst fragen Sie mich gar nicht, sonst gehe ich nach Hause, nicht?
Ja, bitte. Das Wort gehört Ihnen.
Kann nicht ununterbrochen. Sehen Sie mal, Sie fragen mich zum Beispiel vollkommen stumpfsinnige Sachen und wissen nicht, dass Ihre ganze Fragerei, das ist da schon, dass Sie eigentlich die Antwort, die Sie von mir wollen, sich selber geben müssten. Sie fragen mich zum Beispiel, warum ich das Neue Testament mache. Das kann doch überhaupt nur jemand fragen, der entweder vollkommen ahnungslos ist oder jemand, der also bösartig ist.
Sie halten mich für bösartig.
Nein, ich sage, das kann nur ja... Wie kann man mich fragen, ob ich das Neue Testament mache? Das können doch nur Idioten fragen, für meine Begriffe. Warum? Haben Sie nicht den Beweis dafür, dass in Amerika oder Gott sei Dank heute oder auf der ganzen Welt schon Millionen und Abermillionen von Menschen das wollen? Wie können Sie mich das fragen? Nur um wieder mich dazu zu benutzen, zu fragen, also warum ausgerechnet er und war man oder weswegen haben Sie den Auftrag, ein Interview mit mir zu machen zum Beispiel? Weswegen? Weswegen? Weil Sie das interessiert, dass ich das Programm mache oder weil Sie irgendwelche Kuriositäten herausfinden wollen?
Gehört das jetzt zu den berühmten...
Das gehört zu allem. Das gehört zu allem. Oder hauen Sie mit Ihren Kameras ab, Sie interessieren mich einen Dreck. Wenn Sie nicht fähig sind, Ihre richtigen Fragen zu stellen und mir nicht zuhören können, was ich sage, dann ich weiß genau, wovon ich rede, dann lassen Sie das ganze Interview sein. Und da Sie doch an sich doch auch nur angestellt sind von Ihrer verfluchten Firma da, haben Sie überhaupt kein Recht, mir in den Mund zu fahren. Haben Sie das verstanden oder nicht? Ich spreche nicht, weil ich Interview für Millionen von Menschen und nicht für Sie. Oder aber, wenn Sie zuhören, und hören Sie mir jetzt, und unterbrechen mich nicht nur ein einziges Mal, sonst gehe ich sofort nach Hause.
Ich glaube, das ist am besten.
Das ist eine Bande von Idioten! Da kommt jemand angeschissen und provoziert mich einfach, weil er in irgendeinem Laden engagiert ist, um mir ein Interview zu machen. Gehen Sie doch hin in Deutschland und hören Sie an, was ich sage, dann brauchen Sie keine blöden Fragen mehr zu stellen. Ich bin 45 Jahre alt und von einer Analphabete muss ich mir so einen Quatsch erzählen lassen.